You won't believe what happened when a luxury car dealer decided to mock a wealthy black woman just because of her appearance. She walked into the showroom with confidence, but instead of being treated with respect, she was ridiculed and belittled by the salesman. Little did he know, this ordinary woman was a self-made millionaire with connections that would leave him absolutely speechless. And when he found out who her son was, let's just say his arrogance quickly turned into regret. This story is a lesson in humility you won't want to miss. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the gleaming facade of Monarch Motors, a renowned dealership for the most luxurious cars in the city. Its expansive glass walls reflected the vibrant bustle of the city, while inside, the polished floors mirrored rows of vehicles that seemed more like art than automobiles. From the sleek curves of the Rolls-Royce Phantom to the commanding presence of the Lamborghini Urus, each car stood as a testament to wealth, power, and exclusivity. Sophia Carter stepped through the glass doors, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. She was an imposing figure, draped in a tailored navy pantsuit that hugged her slender frame. Her natural curls framed a face that radiated both elegance and authority. Everything about her, from the understated diamond studs in her ears to the leather portfolio she carried, spoke of success. Yet, as she glanced around the showroom, she could already sense the subtle shift in the air. The showroom was filled with the kind of people who didn't need to check price tags. Men in tailored suits moved with an air of entitlement, their arms often linked with younger women who carried designer bags and wore stilettos too high for practicality. Conversations were hushed but laced with a certain smugness, the language of those accustomed to indulgence. Sophia's presence did not go unnoticed. A few heads turned her way, their eyes lingering for a moment before moving on, as though they couldn't quite place her in the puzzle of their exclusive world. She was used to it, the silent question, the unspoken disbelief that someone like her could belong in places like this. It had followed her throughout her career, from boardrooms to gala dinners, but today it only added fuel to her resolve. Ethan Sterling, the manager of Monarch Motors, stood near the center of the showroom, engrossed in a conversation with one of his sales associates. His sharp features and perfectly gelled blonde hair gave him the look of a man who prided himself on appearances. Dressed in a tailored gray suit that seemed to scream exclusivity, he held a cup of espresso in one hand, gesturing animatedly with the other. His laughter rang out, a deep, practiced sound that seemed designed to command attention. Sophia's gaze settled on the centerpiece of the showroom, a jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom with chrome detailing. Its long hood and bold grille exuded a regal confidence, a perfect embodiment of the luxury she was here to explore. She took a step toward the car, her fingertips grazing the smooth surface as she admired its craftsmanship. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "I would like to inquire about this model." Ethan's laughter faltered as he turned toward her. His icy blue eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her face just long enough to reveal his thinly veiled judgment. He took a slow sip from his cup, as if deciding whether she was worth the interruption. Finally, he smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at our pre-owned lot," he said, his tone drenched in condescension. "This vehicle is rather exclusive, and our clientele typically understands its value." Sophia felt the sting of his words, but her expression remained neutral. Years of navigating spaces where she was underestimated had taught her how to maintain her composure. She straightened her posture slightly, her portfolio tucked under her arm like a shield. "I am well aware of the value of this vehicle," she replied evenly. "In fact, I was hoping to discuss its performance features and customization options. Ethan let out a short, dismissive laugh, glancing over his shoulder as if to share a private joke with his colleague. His amusement was palpable, echoing across the showroom in a way that drew the attention of nearby customers. "Ma'am, this car costs more than most people make in 5 years," he said, his voice loud enough to ensure others heard. "I wouldn't want to waste your time." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. Sophia could feel the weight of their stares, the way they appraised her without context, without understanding. But she refused to back down. Instead, she stepped closer to Ethan, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the arrogance radiating from him. "And yet here I am," she said, her words measured and deliberate. "Shall we discuss the car? Or do I need to find someone more qualified?" For a moment, Ethan's mask of confidence slipped. He opened his mouth to respond, but whatever retort he had planned was interrupted by the soft click of heels approaching. A woman in her early 20s, wearing a fitted dress and holding an oversized designer purse, sidled up to him. "Ethan, darling," she purred, ignoring Sophia entirely. "Have you decided on the reservations for tonight?" Ethan's smile returned, broader now, as he placed a hand on the woman's lower back. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Let me finish up here and we'll head out." Sophia's patience was wearing thin. She cleared her throat, drawing Ethan's attention back to her. "I'm still waiting for that information," she said. Ethan's smile faded. "Look," he said, his tone hardening. "We have certain standards here at Monarch Motors. I'm sure you understand. Perhaps you should leave before this becomes uncomfortable for everyone." Sophia raised an eyebrow, her calm exterior beginning to crack. Before she could respond, Ethan turned to one of the security guards stationed near the entrance. "Please escort this woman out," he said, waving dismissively in Sophia's direction. The guard hesitated, glancing between Ethan and Sophia as if unsure how to proceed. But Ethan's glare left little room for defiance. Reluctantly, the guard approached Sophia, his expression apologetic. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said softly. Sophia didn't move. Instead, she placed her portfolio on the hood of the Rolls-Royce, her gaze locked on Ethan. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice calm but firm. Ethan rolled his eyes, gesturing for the guard to proceed. The man reached for Sophia's arm, but she stepped back, raising her hands in a gesture of compliance. "There's no need for theatrics," she said. "I'm leaving." As she walked toward the exit, Sophia felt the sting of humiliation. The murmurs of the other customers, the smug expressions on their faces, the weight of Ethan's laughter, all of it burned. But underneath the hurt was a flicker of something stronger, something sharper. A plan was forming, one that Ethan Sterling would never see coming. As she stepped out into the sunlight, Sophia pulled out her phone. Scrolling through her contacts, she found the name she was looking for and pressed dial. "Elijah, it's me," she said when her son answered. "We need to talk." Sophia Carter sat at the marble counter of her kitchen, a glass of water untouched in front of her. The sprawling penthouse apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic view of the city, was bathed in the golden hues of sunset. The skyline, a testament to the progress she had fought so hard to achieve, felt more distant than usual. The humiliation at Monarch Motors replayed in her mind, each dismissive word from Ethan Sterling cutting deeper than she cared to admit. But it wasn't the first time she had faced such treatment, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. The difference this time was that she wasn't just going to walk away. Across the counter sat Elijah Carter, her son, who had arrived moments earlier. His tall, athletic frame leaned forward slightly as he listened intently, his expression a mixture of anger and determination. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, his presence radiated confidence and professionalism. His sharp jawline, framed by a neatly trimmed beard, tensed as Sophia recounted the events at the dealership. "They handcuffed you," Elijah said, his voice low and measured. His fists clenched on the counter, the only outward sign of the anger bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "They did," Sophia confirmed, her tone steady. "And they made a spectacle of it just like they intended. But that's not the point." Elijah leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. His mind was already racing through the possibilities, considering the legal avenues and the public narrative that could be shaped from this. He had built a career on precision, dismantling cases with the same methodical approach his mother had taught him. But this wasn't just another case. This was personal. "Did they know who you are?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Of course not," Sophia replied with a faint smile. "That would have required them to see me as more than just another black woman who didn't belong in their world." Elijah nodded, his jaw tightening. He had heard similar stories from his clients, tales of indignity and prejudice that made his blood boil. But hearing it from his mother, the woman who had taught him everything he knew about resilience and dignity, was another matter entirely. "What do you want to do about it?" he asked finally. Sophia sipped her water, her expression contemplative. "I want this to be more than just about me," she said. "This isn't the first time they've treated someone like this, and it won't be the last unless we do something." Elijah's eyes narrowed, the wheels in his mind turning. He had always admired his mother's ability to think several steps ahead, to turn every setback into an opportunity. It was a trait she had instilled in him from a young age, and now it was second nature. "All right," he said. "Let's make them regret it." Sophia's lips curved into a small smile. "That's my boy," she said softly. The next morning, Elijah sat in his office at Carter Legal Associates, a firm he had co-founded with two of his closest colleagues from law school. The modern space, with its sleek furniture and minimalist design, reflected the efficiency and professionalism that defined his practice. A stack of case files sat neatly on his desk, but his focus was entirely on the events of the previous day. He opened his laptop and began drafting a legal strategy. The first step was to gather evidence. He needed witness statements, security footage from the dealership, and any internal communications that might reveal a pattern of discriminatory behavior. He made a few calls, reaching out to contacts in the legal community and civil rights organizations. If Monarch Motors had a history of incidents like this, he was going to uncover it. As he worked, Elijah's mind drifted back to his childhood. He remembered the nights his mother would sit at their tiny kitchen table, poring over textbooks while he played with toy cars at her feet. She had been relentless in her pursuit of a better life, juggling law school and a full-time job while raising him alone after his father's passing. Her sacrifices had shaped him, instilling in him a drive to excel and a deep sense of justice. One memory in particular stood out. It was a rainy evening, and he had just lost a school debate competition. He had come home feeling defeated, but his mother had sat him down and told him something he would never forget. "Elijah," she had said, "winning isn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It's about being the smartest. It's about knowing when to strike and how to make it count." That lesson had carried him through countless trials, both in the courtroom and in life. And now, as he prepared to take on Monarch Motors, he knew exactly how to make it count. Sophia, meanwhile, was working on her own strategy. Sitting in the conference room of Carter Global Investments, She met with her executive team to discuss the potential acquisition of Monarch Motors' parent company. The company, a sprawling conglomerate that owns several luxury car dealerships, had been on her radar for months as a potential investment. Now, the timing felt serendipitous. "I want a full financial analysis of their operations," she instructed her team. "I need to know their weaknesses, their liabilities, and how we can leverage this acquisition to enforce systemic change." Her team nodded, taking notes as she outlined her vision. Sophia had always been a trailblazer in the financial world, but this was personal. She wasn't just investing in a company. She was investing in a movement. By the end of the week, Elijah had compiled a mountain of evidence. Security footage from Monarch Motors showed Ethan Sterling dismissing Sophia with a smug grin, while audio recordings captured his condescending remarks. Witness statements from other customers painted a clear picture of a toxic culture, and internal emails obtained through legal channels revealed a disturbing pattern of discriminatory practices. Elijah shared his findings with Sophia over dinner at her penthouse. They sat on the terrace, the city lights sparkling in the distance as they reviewed the evidence. "This is damning," Elijah said, scrolling through a series of emails on his tablet. "They've been systematically excluding customers based on race and socioeconomic status. It's not just unethical, it's illegal." Sophia nodded, her expression grim. "And we're going to make sure they pay for it," she said. "But this isn't just about punishing them. It's about setting a precedent, about showing people that this kind of behavior has real consequences." Elijah smiled, a rare moment of warmth breaking through his professional demeanor. "You've always taught me to think big," he said. "Let's make this the start of something bigger." The following morning, Elijah filed a lawsuit against Monarch Motors, citing discrimination, false imprisonment, and defamation. The news spread quickly, with media outlets picking up the story and social media users rallying behind Sophia's cause. As the public outcry grew, Sophia and Elijah worked tirelessly to ensure their message was heard. Sophia appeared on morning news programs and talk shows, sharing her story with poise and conviction. She spoke not just about her own experience, but about the broader issue of systemic discrimination in luxury markets. "This isn't just about me," she told one interviewer. "It's about all the people who have been made to feel like they don't belong. It's about changing the culture and creating a world where everyone is treated with respect." Meanwhile, Elijah continued to build his case, coordinating with civil rights organizations and advocacy groups to amplify their efforts. The momentum was undeniable, and the Carters were just getting started. As the week came to a close, Sophia received a call from her investment team. The acquisition of Monarch Motors' parent company was moving forward, and they were on track to secure a controlling interest within days. The pieces of their plan were falling into place, and the Carters were ready to deliver the final blow. Ethan Sterling sat in his corner office at Monarch Motors, the city's premier luxury car dealership, poring over the latest sales reports. The leather chair beneath him creaked softly as he leaned back, savoring the numbers that told a story of exclusivity and profit. The sun streamed through the tall glass windows, illuminating the polished wooden desk that bore no trace of clutter. It was a space curated to convey success and authority. The events of the previous week had already faded from his mind. The woman who had caused a minor disruption in the showroom was nothing more than a passing annoyance. He had dealt with her type before, people who overestimated their place in the world of luxury. He prided himself on maintaining the dealership's high standards, ensuring that only those who truly belonged could claim ownership of the vehicles he sold. As Ethan leaned forward to take a sip of his espresso, The intercom on his desk buzzed. His assistant's voice came through, slightly hesitant. "Mr. Sterling, there is someone here to see you. He says his name is Elijah Carter." Ethan frowned. The name rang a faint bell, but he couldn't place it. "Do I have an appointment with him?" he asked, his tone clipped. "No, sir, but he says it's important." Ethan sighed, irritation flashing across his face. "Send him in," he said, setting his cup down with a bit more force than necessary. He straightened his tie, prepared to meet whoever this uninvited guest was with his usual air of detached superiority. The door opened, and a tall man stepped inside. Elijah Carter exuded a quiet confidence that filled the room. His dark tailored suit fit him perfectly, and the polished leather of his shoes caught the sunlight streaming in. His expression was calm, almost pleasant, but there was an intensity in his gaze that made Ethan shift uncomfortably. "Mr. Sterling," Elijah said, extending a hand as he approached the desk. "Thank you for seeing me." Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second before standing and shaking Elijah's hand. His grip was firm, but there was an undercurrent of unease. "Please take a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "How can I help you today?" Elijah sat down, placing a sleek leather briefcase on the desk between them. He opened it with practiced precision, revealing a stack of documents. As he began to speak, his tone remained professional, but there was an unmistakable edge to his words. "I believe you recently had an encounter with my mother, Sophia Carter," he said. His eyes locked on Ethan's. Recognition dawned on Ethan's face, followed quickly by a flash of discomfort. He forced a tight smile, leaning back in his chair. Yes," he said. "There was a bit of a misunderstanding, but it was resolved." Elijah's smile didn't waver, but his eyes seemed to sharpen. "I would hardly call having her handcuffed and removed from your dealership a misunderstanding," he said. "And it's far from resolved." Ethan's discomfort deepened. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain his composure. "Look, Mr. Carter," he began, but Elijah held up a hand, cutting him off. "Allow me to clarify the situation," Elijah said, his voice calm but firm. "These are the legal documents outlining the charges my mother is filing against you and your dealership. Discrimination, false imprisonment, and defamation are just the beginning." He slid the stack of papers across the desk. "I suggest you read them thoroughly." Ethan picked up the documents, his hands trembling slightly as he skimmed the pages. The allegations were detailed and damning, supported by witness statements and security footage. His face grew pale as the weight of the evidence sank in. "This is outrageous," he said, his voice rising. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am very serious," Elijah replied. "And so is the Consumer Protection Bureau, the Civil Rights Commission, and the numerous advocacy groups that are now aware of your behavior. My team has ensured that this case will receive the attention it deserves." Ethan's bravado began to crumble. He set the documents down, his fingers gripping the edge of the desk as if to steady himself. "Look," he said, his tone softening. "Surely we can come to some sort of arrangement. This doesn't have to get out of hand." Elijah leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "It's already out of hand, Mr. Sterling," he said. "And if you think this is simply about money, you're mistaken. This is about accountability and justice." Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Elijah wasn't finished. "There's one more thing," Elijah said, his voice dropping slightly. "As of this morning, Carter Global Investments has acquired a controlling interest in Monarch Motors' parent company. Effective immediately, you're no longer in charge here." Ethan stared at him, his mind racing to process the words. His grip on the desk tightened as the reality of his situation set in. "You can't do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I already have," Elijah replied, his tone cold and final. "Consider this your notice. The board will be in touch regarding the terms of your termination." The color drained from Ethan's face. He sank back into his chair, his confidence replaced with a hollow despair. The empire he had built on arrogance and prejudice was crumbling before his eyes. Elijah stood, gathering his briefcase and turning toward the door. He paused, glancing back at Ethan one last time. "My mother taught me to always deliver important news in person," he said. "I hope this serves as a valuable lesson for you." Without another word, he walked out, leaving Ethan alone with his regrets. The fallout from the confrontation was swift and far-reaching. News of the lawsuit and the corporate takeover spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and sparking a national conversation about discrimination in luxury spaces. Advocacy groups rallied behind Sophia Carter, praising her courage and determination to challenge systemic injustice. Under Elijah's guidance, Monarch Motors underwent a complete overhaul. Diversity and inclusion training became mandatory for all employees, and hiring practices were restructured to create a more equitable workplace. A zero-tolerance policy for discrimination was implemented, and customers were encouraged to report any incidents of bias. Meanwhile, Sophia and Elijah launched the Carter Foundation, dedicated to providing legal and financial support to victims of racial discrimination. The foundation quickly gained traction, partnering with prominent organizations and raising millions in donations. Sophia stood on the terrace of her penthouse one evening, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. A sense of peace washed over her as she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced adversity, but she had also triumphed, turning her pain into progress and her humiliation into hope for others. As she sipped her tea, she heard the faint hum of an engine approaching. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled into the driveway below, its polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. Elijah stepped out, his confident stride and warm smile a reminder of everything she had fought for. He joined her on the terrace, handing her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "A little surprise," he said. "Open it." Sophia unfolded the envelope to reveal a set of keys. Her eyes widened as she looked at him. "Another Rolls-Royce?" she asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. He grinned. "Consider it a reminder of what we've accomplished." Sophia laughed softly, shaking her head. "You've always had a flair for the dramatic," she said. "But thank you." They stood together, gazing out at the city that had tested them but never broken them. In that moment, they knew that their fight for justice was far from over. But they also knew that they had the strength, the resilience, and the determination to face whatever came next. Justice, Sophia thought, is not just about punishment. It is about change. And together, she and Elijah were changing the world, one battle at a time. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to support more powerful storytelling like this. And don't stop there. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next video. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below to let us know how this story impacted you or what you'd like to see next. Your feedback helps us create meaningful content that connects with you. Thank you for being a part of our community. Your voice matters,